What are the greatest exports of Africa? If I were to ask you, what is Africa's greatest export? What would you say? Is it petroleum, oil and gas? Is it timber and forestry? Is it certainly it's not manufactured goods, and certainly it is not what most people think about agricultural products, even though a huge percentage of Africans, especially in the mother continent, are involved in farming. And you may be thinking, but who are you talking about production, African manufacturing and exports and all of that? Well, my name is Gideon Fomukwai, the story warrior. I see myself as a product of Africa, produced in Asia, packaged in America, and distributed worldwide. The important fact I want you to note here is I grew up in the mother continent. I grew up on the mother continent, and I've been fortunate professionally to travel a fair bit within Southern Africa, fair bit within Central Africa where I grew up, but most of my career has been overseas. And so sometimes I look at Africa, the motherland, Africa, the beautiful, through the eyes of someone who was raised there, through the eyes of someone who is looking from outside. Turns out, either way, it is very interesting. I would argue that the greatest export of Africa in all times, in all ages, is African intellectual power. Right before the Dark Ages, through the Dark Ages and above, and until today, I still think that the greatest export from Africa are African people, their minds, their creativity, and what they do. But that's not what I want us to talk about. I don't want to talk about the physical things. I want us to talk about the intangible. In the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a new breed, a new African export into the world market space that nobody predicted: African music. And the increasing export of African music and African culture to Europe. Traditionally, it's always been to Europe, but now increasingly to Americas. And yes, dare I to say, Asia, Southern America, and beyond. So, the reason I'm coming live today is to say tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, I will have the great fortune, my humble self, the story warrior, to interview someone who is helping Africa to weave a new narrative in the global market space. I will have the great pleasure of interviewing someone tomorrow, October 1st, 2023. I'll be talking to a guru in the African music scene, especially from the diaspora. I will be talking to Mr. Anderson Obiago, who has been at the forefront of promoting African music in the diaspora. Now, when I say African music, I'm not talking about the music that your grandparents listened to. I'm not talking about the music that reigned in the 1970s. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a new breed of African music that is taking the world by storm and shaking the world and reminding all of us that the good old continent, the good old motherland has always thrived on the tapestry of the creative minds that have been able to sustain generations and generations through song, through rhythm. For hundreds of years, African rhythms, African drums, some of them not even known to the rest of the world, have shaped the global music scene. But did you know that in the last 15 years, a new breed of Africans call them the tigers, not the hippos. To use the wise words of, of Professor Anyite, the new breed of African tigers that is emerging on the global scene is using modern tools, and yes, a fair bit of the old tools, to infuse African rhythms, African songs, African traditions, African culture into the global fabric. And this is a beautiful thing because nobody saw this coming. Yes, you saw the timber. Yes, you saw the oil and gas. Yes, you saw the petroleum products. Yes, you saw the minerals, the bauxite, the aluminum, the gold, the copper. You saw all of that coming. But did you see that African music making global entrance? Did you observe, did you notice that young Africans, Gen Ys, Gen Zs, are getting heard in as far away as you can think of? In the Far East, I've lived in the East, I've lived in the Orient, and I've seen schools taking on programs that are very ambitious, and schools that are teaching programs that relate to the origins and the evolution of African music. But that's still not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the new generation of Africans who are taking a place on the center stage and using their rhythms and sounds to cheer up everybody. In Hollywood, they're winning awards. If you talk about BET Awards, they're there. You talk about filling Madison Square Garden, they're there. You talk about NBA Finals, they're there. You talk about every major cultural setting where the movers and shakers gather. African music is slowly making its way to the center of the stage. And this is a powerful moment because it tells all of us the power of the creativity that resides in each one of us, whether you're African or non African. Your power of appreciation of something creative, something brilliant, excellence, doesn't matter where it comes from. But I'm saying that tomorrow, Sunday, at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, I'll be talking to someone who is a facilitator in the process of disseminating African rhythms and sounds around the world. In the African diaspora, of course, you naturally have millions and millions of Africans living particularly out here in the West. In Europe, lots of them. In the Americas, lots of them. In Asia, increasingly lots of them. But did you know that with them, the music is getting more and more acceptable in places where you did not expect? On radio, on TV, you name it, on YouTube, they drop in songs. Some of the songs go viral. They drop in bits and pieces that you did not expect, and suddenly they explode. There is a trend going on out there. There is a wave. There is a tsunami for appreciation of African rhythms and sounds. And I want to tell you, my friends, get ready to listen and learn the story, the untold story of how African music is taking the world by storm. Get ready to learn from someone who is at the heart, at the center of the dissemination of African music, how African music is creeping up. And in the process of creeping up, it is pushing to the exterior some of the music that has often been center stage. And all I'm saying is, as a story warrior, I want us to explore that story. I want us to look at the story behind that and ask ourselves, what can we learn from this? And what else remains to be discovered in the ambit of Africa? What else remains to be discovered in the motherland? And I'm not being biased. Yes, I'm biased. But also, I want to say there's a bigger lesson here for all of us. For anyone that creates, for anyone that desires to do something powerful, the lesson here is, if you're willing to sit down and commit yourself to excellence, the world will beat a path to your door. Because I've seen some of the emerging stars in African music. They tour the world And with those touring of the world come tour dollars. Where do those tour dollars go? I believe some of them are sipping back to the mother continent and changing the fabric of life and changing the way people are moving upward. There's upward mobility in Africa. And some of this upward mobility is orchestrated by the increasing penetration of African music into the world scene. And this is a story that nobody's telling you about. The BBC is not telling you about it. CNN is not telling you about it. VOA is not telling you about it. RFE is not telling you about it. But guess what? Story Warrior is willing to explore this with you. The Story Warrior is able to say, come closer, pull a seat. Let's sit around the virtual fireside and just talk to someone who knows how music from the motherland is transforming the whole world. And that's what I intend to do tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I urge you, pull a seat, get close to your computer and watch on the Story Warrior channel this fascinating conversation with this fascinating gentleman, Anderson Obiagu, how African music is taking the world by storm. More importantly, in that process, it's changing the narrative. An untold story with unsung heroes told to you through the eyes someone who knows what's happening out there in terms of dollars, in terms of numbers, in terms of global appreciation. And when we unpack that, we can begin to ask ourselves, how many more intellectual products we're not exploring? How many more intellectual ideas are we leaving on the table unexplored? But whatever you do, wherever you are, tomorrow 2 p.m., please join the Story Warrior. On the Story Warrior channel, let us unpack how African music is connecting and transforming the global music scene in America, in Europe, Asia, South America, and so forth, further beyond. I can't wait to see you tomorrow at 2 p.m. And I know you can't wait to see me. So tell somebody, join us. This has been Gideon from Okwai. The Story Warrior inviting you, please join us tomorrow at 2 p.m. Let us tap into the brain of this fascinating music promoter, this cultural bridge builder, this unsung hero telling us about an untold story that is changing the global narrative. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And please invite someone for tomorrow 2 p.m. Thank you to you. Peace, Story Warrior, on the move.